Okay, we're back. It's COMP228. It's week 3, lesson 3, part 3, and we're into more of the PowerPoint presentation. One piece I'm not going to cover too much is this idea of Java API packages. There are a ton of Java API or application interfaces, right? Programming interfaces. For example, the Java AWT event interface for which is the Java Abstract Window Toolkit event package, right? We're not going to really talk too much about that right now. We're going to get into these kind of things later, but they're here inside of your PowerPoint. If you want to reference them, there's different packages that produce different. They have almost like different functionality that's packaged up for you, right? Here's what we're going to talk in week 8 or sorry, week 7 in that range, week 7 or week 6. We're going to talk about this Java Swing javax.swing API. This is the UI components package that we're going to be using for the first part of this course, the javax swing library, right? So this is the component we're going to be accessing, and that's all I'm really going to say about APIs for this particular PowerPoint. I'm just going to kind of skip through that. There's a couple of cases that are outlined in this PowerPoint presentation. One of them is this idea of this secure random number generator. That's part of generating random numbers. Now, we make this secure random method as we use the next int that receives an int argument and returns a number between 0 and up to not including the argument's value. Well, let's look at some examples of this. Here's an example of a 6-sided die. Hey, this goes right back to your assignment, right? One of your assignments asks you to make a die rolling thing, right? And it says, here's my face. The face value, which is probably an integer, is 1 plus random numbers dot next int. Okay, that's what it looks like. That's the form that you're going to see. And if you notice, it goes up to, but not including 6. So that's 0 to 5 plus 1. You could have written this differently, by the way. You could have said face is equal to random numbers dot next int 6 plus 1. You could have also done that. It's the same, right? And that's usually how I write it, right? Because I'm old school like that, right? I usually add 1 to the end of a return. I don't do it the other way around typically. So let's look at some code and see what that looks like. So here's secure random, and if you notice, I need to use this import Java security secure random in order for me to do this random number, which is not necessarily a bad thing to do. So let's try this out. So we're going to make this a secure number, a secure random number that we're going to it's going to be more random than just a pseudo random number that we get. And what we do is we create a random number sequence. So when I go next int, the sequence has already been defined. I'm just going to the next random number that's been generated ahead of time for me, right, in my sequence. So next int gets the next number. So I want a number between 1 and 6. I'm going to use this methodology. Let's try this out. So one is I need to define a new object, random numbers, right, as an example to generate that. I'm not going to make it a random number here in Eclipse. Let's go back to Eclipse. So that makes no sense to me. I'm going to call this thing, like die, right? I'm going to have 2 dice. Both are 6-sided. That's what I want to have. And when I roll them, I want random numbers to come up. I want them to be, this is kind of like the hello world of game programming, right? When we do this kind of thing. So how do I do this, right? So let's wipe out some of this. This is just the example I use for long and float and casting. So you've seen the cast operator, not because it's a great example. And what I want to do here is create a random number. So I'm going to go secure random, right? So if I say secure random, that's the class, right? Secure random, my secure random class. And I'm going to make my 2 dice, right? So die 1, here's my die 1 thing, which is equal to a new secure random object, right? Now I'm getting some issues. And if I hover over secure random, it says, hey, import secure random from the Java security library, which is what I have to do. This is my package. So I'm going to click on the first quick fix. If you notice, I get this import Java security secure random, right? Okay, cool. I don't need this right now, by the way. Let's leave that kind of blank. We're going to fill that out later on. All right, so I got my first die, and my die is going to be, it's going to generate a random number. Let's do the next one. So I'll say secure random, right? Let's do 2 of them. Die 2, right, is equal to a new secure random number, right? I could do that. I could use the same thing. There's other options here. Okay, what do I want to do? I want to say die 1 then, right, is if I go to next int, if I try this out, I noticed there's a couple problems, right? One is I can get the next integer. What other options I have if I was going to go die 1? Die 1 also, if I'm starting to cast this out, if I go to next, and if I look, I see next Boolean, next double, next float. There's other options here for random numbers, right, that I can use, right? So I could use any one of these. But I noticed right away that my format here for my die is incorrect, okay? What I'm really doing here is not, I don't want to do this. Some of you may be fooled into thinking you can do this. This is incorrect, right? What I want to do is I want to almost create a random number generator, right? That's what I want. So maybe what I want to do is I want to generate random or whatever I want to call it. That's probably a better name for my object, right? So generate random, that's going to be my object, right? And what I want to do is I want to generate the next integer. And I want my die 1 and die 2 to be variables of type int. So here's my int. I'm going to make them die 1. So die 1. And I'll set this right now as a default to 0 as I instantiate them, as I make them, right? Die 2 then is also equal to 0, just initializing them right here. And now what I want is my die 1, and when I start generating it for the first time, my die 1 is equal to my generate random. If I click Control and space, I get some recommendations from Eclipse that I can use my generate random object dot next int. And my next int is going to be bound. When it says bound, I want to use it a number. My upper boundary is 6, right? So a number from 0 to 6 is what this is generating. Well, 0 to 5 plus 1, right? So this is a number between 1 and 6. Okay, I want to do the same thing for die 2. So die 2 then is equal to the same generate random, right? Dot next int, and then I want to go to 6 as well. So I'm doing it twice, plus 1. Hey, I see I'm duplicating code. What could I do differently here, right? I could make it so it's a for loop, right? Run through and do 2 dice. I could use an array, right, of integers and store my random results in the array. I could do that too, right? Array of 2 elements. Okay. But for now, let's leave it as simple as this. And what I want to do is actually create a third value called dice, right? Which I'm also going to set to 0 starting off, right? And my dice value is going to be the sum of both these 2 dice together. So I'm going to do something like this. Dice then is equal to die 1 plus die 2. Right? So the first die and the second die add up to make dice. And what do I want to print out? I want to print out dice. Right? That's the sum of both those 2 random numbers. Right? So I'm going to save, and I'm going to run. And if I've done everything correctly, I should get a number between 2 and 12. That's what this generates, 2 and 12. So if I add these 2 together, so generate a number between 2 and 12, right? This is really useless, right? This little code that I'm writing, by the way. Why is it useless? Anybody? I only do it once. It's hard-coded, right, to 6, right? I only have 2 dice possible, right? So I'm only ever going to get 2 dice adding them together, right? I want to create something that's more complex than this, right, for methods. We're going to do this in a second. So let's just run this again. And if I keep running this thing over and over again, you'll notice that as I keep clicking this, I get different values, 3, 8, 7, 9. It's pretty random, right? Okay, that's what I want to do. I want to make sure that this is working. What I'm doing is I'm getting random numbers between 2 and 12. All right, but I think what's more useful for us when we do a method is create a method that does this for us, right? That kind of asks me for a couple things. How many dice do I want, right? How many dice do I want? I want X number of dice, 1 die, 2 dice, 3 dice, 10 dice, how many they are, right? And then I want it to return the value of all those dice together, kind of rolled together. And how big are the dice? Are they 6-sided dice? Are they 10-sided dice? Are they 20-sided dice? They're 100-sided dice. How many sides do the dice have, right? And who's ever played with dice before, right? Some people haven't, by the way. People don't play. That's why I don't laugh. Some people don't never play with dice in their life. And if you've never played with dice in your life, they're just polyhedrons, right? That's all they are. They're shapes, different kind of shapes. Sometimes they're 6-sided, 10-sided, 12-sided, all kinds of dice. And they occur naturally in nature, these shapes. So back in the days when we were gambling, you know, back in even Roman days and before that, we used different shapes, or we cut stone or different other things, wood, into the same shapes that we see naturally occurring in nature. So if I say dice, and if I go look at images, just so we know what they look like, you can see that the regular dice are these 6-sided dice, but there's also other shapes for dice. Like, for example, especially when you play desktop role-playing games like this, right? You can see that this is a collection of different shapes. This is a 10-sided die. This is an 8-sided die. This is a 6-sided die, a 4-sided die, a 20-sided die, and a 12-sided die. So there's different dice, and they can have different sides, different shapes to the dice, and they provide different values. So it'd be great if we made a method that can roll any die from, you know, let's say from whatever 0 to whatever, 1 to something. Actually, it has to be at least 1. It can't be less than one side. So how do we write this method? We have to make it smart. It can't be a one-sided dice, because that would be like a piece of paper, right? That you're kind of dropping. It'd be the same number all the time. 0, 0, right? Hold on, 0, right? If it's a 2-sided dice, right, it'd be like a coin, right? That's a 2-sided dice, right? You flip a coin, right? It's either 0 or 1. Also Boolean, right? 0 or 1. That's a kind of a coin. That's what a 2-sided dice is. So I don't want 2-sided dice, right? That's kind of weird. So I've got to kind of filter for that. I'll generate it, but that's kind of weird, right? Okay, so there's got to be a little bit of validation going on in here too. So how do I write this method, and what do I call it? So I'm going to make it a public static method. Let's do this public static method down here. So public static method that returns some kind of integer, right? Public static int that's going to return, and it's going to be called, you know, roll dice, something like that. Roll dice. The roll dice method, right? Let's leave it with the empty signature right now. So there's my empty signature call, right, for my method. And if you notice, it says, this method that must return a result of type int. Well, guess what my int result is going to be? It's going to return an integer value, right, which is probably going to be, we're going to call it result. Return result. Well, there is no result. Let's assign a result variable. And the result variable should be private, right, because we don't care for it to be shared outside of this method. Now, the thing is, I can't make it private because I'm in a method that's static, and I can't decide access modifiers. So let's leave it as is. So we'll say int result then, right, is equal to 0. We'll set the result to 0 as a default, right? That's the first thing that's going to happen, and it takes care of our little error here, okay? Now, the next thing I want to do when I roll the dice is I want to decide the number of dice I'm going to roll, how many sides they have, right, is the second thing I need. So I need a int with num dice. That's the first kind of variable, right? That's my first parameter that I'm taking in. And the second parameter is how many sides do each of the dice have? Because I'm limiting it. You can't have one 6-sided die, one 2-sided die, one 5-sided die. They're all got to be the same size in this example, okay, just to make it easy. We can make a more complicated method later, right? But for now, this is the way we're going to do it. Int, we're going to say number of dice, number of sides, okay? Those are the two things we want. Okay, cool. Number of dice, num dice, is really what's going to define our array, all right? Our array. How do I make an array because we're going to talk about that later on, an array of integers that I need to define a fixed number array, a fixed size for the array. How do I do that? How do I initialize an array of integers? Well, the way I would do it is like this. Int, right, an int array of how many? I'm defining it as a certain number, right? Can I do it here? Can I do something like num sides, right, or num dice? Can I do that? Int num dice, right? I could do that, and I can call it something. It's got to be there's got to be a variable name for it, right? Which is called, we're probably going to call it dice, right? Here's a problem. If I hover over this, it says, syntax error, or on token num dice, delete the token. See, this I can do, an integer array, right? I don't know how many dice I have. But what if I want to make it a new array? Is equal to a new. Can I use the array keyword? Is there such a word like that? Array, right? Or int array of length num dice. Can I do that? And that's the proper syntax for an array, my friends and lovelies, right? So I'm declaring dice as an integer array type, and I'm instantiating it with the length of the number of dice that I've put in here. So that means if I put in, back to arrays in C#, people are sometimes weak with this, so I'm going to recap what that is. If I say I want 3 dice, how many elements do I have? 3. If I say 3 dice, right? What does the first element start with? 0. It's 0-based counting, right? Then it goes 1, 2. So it goes 0, 1, 2 for my index. So that's the first thing. So I got 3 dice here. Okay, now I got number of sides, right? Why is this important? This generates my random number. This random number is, instead of going to be 6 now, it's going to be what num sides is, right? Okay, let's make a for loop. So for, right, we're going to say index, int index is equal to 0, right? This is like how we do a for loop, remember? 0. And then when index, as long as index is less than what? Num dice, or num dice minus 1. So num dice is 3. We can only go as high as 2, right? Ever. So we can only go num dice minus 1. We can do that. We're going to start from 0. We can start from 1, 2, and go to num dice. We can do that too, but then we would have a weird index. We want to start from 0 because we're at 0-based counting, right? And then index plus plus, right? We're going to increase our index count as we move through our for loop, right? Here's our for loop. So as we move through this for loop, what I want to do is initialize each of my my dice elements, right? So I'm going to say then dice index, right, is equal to, and we're going to take this generate random idea because we have this as part of something we're going to use, right? But hold on, I can't do generate random here because I don't have my secure random number generator accessible in here, can't I? Do I? No. So we're going to take it out of here. So we don't need to do it here, right? I'm going to kind of cut it out of here. And we're going to kill this area anyway and put it in here. We're going to declare it as one of our methods, my method variables here, right? And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this generate random method here, cut it, and I'm going to put it to here and paste, right? And instead of it being to 6, it's going to be to num sides, right? See if you follow me here, okay? I'm going to kill all this because I don't need any of this stuff now because my thing is just going to call the roll dice method, right? So here's my dice. It adds up all the dice, right? And each of my dice kind of adds up. I could do this, right? And I have a number of dice that's going to go through, blah, blah, blah. But this is really inefficient, isn't it? Right? I've created an array for nothing. I've still got to add them up later, which means I got to add another for loop that runs through this thing to add them all up and make a result, right? I've shown you how to do the array, but I don't need an array. All I need to do is my sum or my result plus equals to my generate next index int num sides, right? And I'm going to do that for num dice minus 1. That's all I need to do. So I go 0, 1, 2. If there's only 2 dice or 3 dice, it's going to add all those 3 dice together. So let's kill this. I'm just showing you how to do an array. And instead of doing dice index, I'm going to go result then, in one line, is plus equal to generate random next int num sides. Less than or equal to? Why? If it goes to the same, it goes 0. If it goes 1, right, I'm still less than. If it goes 2, it's not less than anymore if there's only 2 dice, right? And then it's going to stop. Trust me.
Then it will go only 1 time.
2 times.
Suppose there are 2 dice, then 2 minus 1 is 1, and then 1 is less than 1.
Let's see. Let's see if I'm right, right? I like your thinking, but let's see if I'm right. So here's what this thing does. It returns the result of this die. If I go 2 dice of 6 sides, I should get a number between 2 and 12. Let's check this out. So now, instead of here, I'm going to go like this. Roll dice inside my thing. And I need 2 things for my signatures. 2 dice. and each of them has 6 sides, just like we did before, right? Let's save this thing, and if we run this, let's see what we result, if you're right or not. I get a 3. Is that between 2 and 12? Yes, it is. Let's see if I can get higher. I get a 3. I get a 6. I get a 2. I get a 3. I get a 5. I never get higher than 6, which is makes you correct. But if I do less than or equal to, like you're saying, right? And if I roll this again, now I get 5. Now I get 7. Now I get 6. Now I get 9. Now how about if I have more variables here? If I, instead of 2 dice, I have 3 dice. That means I can get up to 18 now, right? So run. And I can get 15, and I can get 14, and I can get 16, and I can get 10. So this is a better method than what I wrote before. Now before we go, I'm going to update this thing so we have this code. Yes, you're right too. But let's go into commit, right? And we're going to say added the roll dice method, right? And that's what we did. I'm going to commit and push. So we have everything together and press OK. And now you guys have everything. Tonight, I'm going to go over more of arrays and everything else that we're going to do together. And I'm going to go through the rest of the PowerPoint presentations. Be prepared to be bored. I mean, be prepared to be wowed and amazed by the level of complexity we're going to go into for both methods and arrays. Okay, tonight. Again, the broadcast will be around 7. Okay, in that range. Okay, if I have a problem, I will let you know. I will also make a notification on eCentennial to remind everybody. Okay, thanks so much. See you tonight.